An issue that really grabbed me as urgent were issues related to population.
In 1998, Dr. Zabin became the founding director of the Bill and Melinda Gates Institute for Population Control.
Dr. Zabin became the founding director of the Bill and Melinda Gates Institute for Population Control.
We see a lot of things that are going very well, things like reducing childhood death and First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
The problem is that the population is growing the fastest where people are less able to deal with it. So it's in the very poorest places that you're going to have a tripling in population by 2050. And so their ability to feed, educate, provide jobs, stability, protect the environment in those locations mean they're faced with an almost impossible problem. Here we can see a chart that looks at the total world population over the last several hundred years. And at first glance, this is a bit scary. We go from less than 1 billion in 1800, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.4 billion where we are today is happening even faster. So Melinda and I wondered whether providing new medicines and keeping children alive, would that create more of a population problem?
And what the developing world does not need is more children.
And I think that was the biggest aha to Bill and me when we got into this work, is we asked ourselves, of course, the same hard-nosed question you'd ask, which is, if you get into this work and you start to save these children, will women just keep overpopulating the world? And thank goodness the converse is absolutely true.
This is a very important question to get right, because it was absolutely key for me. When our foundation first started up, it was focused on reproductive health. That was the main thing we did, because I thought, population growth in poor countries is the biggest problem they face. You've got to help mothers who want to limit family size have the tools and education to do that. And that's the only thing that really counts. Is spending $1 million on that last 3 months of life for that patient, would it be better not to lay off those 10 teachers and to make that trade-off in medical costs? But that's called the death panel, and you're not supposed to have that discussion.
But that's called the death panel, and you're not supposed to have that discussion.
Behind closed doors on this New York campus, a secret gathering of some of the world's most powerful people. Gates, Buffett, Bloomberg, Winfrey. It was like the Super Friends. Together with others at the meeting, including George Soros, Ted Turner, David Rockefeller, they're worth more than $125 billion.
That much money, that much power around one table. It begs the question, what were they doing? What were they scheming? Total world domination?
This group, together for 6 hours, was talking about charity, education, emergency relief, global health, the new Superman and Wonder Woman, the super rich friends, not fighting bad guys, but fighting for good nonetheless.
Apparently, one of the things they discussed was what each of them knows about what really works and what doesn't work, so they can concentrate their resources.
An epidemic, either naturally caused or intentionally caused, is the most likely thing to cause, say, 10 million excess deaths. Today, the greatest risk of global catastrophe doesn't look like this. Instead, it looks like this. If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. That's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look.
Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero.
Now, malaria is, of course, transmitted by mosquitoes. I brought some here. so you could experience this. We'll let those roam around the auditorium a little bit. There. There's no reason only poor people should have the experience.
But did you come to reproductive issues as an intellectual?
When I was growing up, my parents were always involved in various volunteer things. My dad was head of Planned Parenthood, and it was very controversial to be involved with that.
My dad was head of Planned Parenthood.
The ultimate solution, the only thing that really lets us go back completely to normal and feel good about sitting in a stadium with lots of other people, is to create a vaccine and not just take care of our country, but take that vaccine out to the global population.
Take that vaccine out to the global population.
We clearly need a vaccine that works in the upper age range because they're most at risk of that. And doing that so that you amp it up so it works in older people and yet you don't have side effects. You know, if we have, 1 in 10,000 side effects, that's, way more, 700,000, people who will suffer from that.
Way more, 700,000, people who will suffer from that.
The side effects for the Moderna vaccine sound concerning. We looked. After the second dose, at least 80% of participants experienced a systemic side effect, ranging from severe chills to fevers. So, are these vaccines safe?
Well, the FDA, not being pressured, will look hard at that. The FDA is the gold standard of regulators, and their current guidance on this, if they stick with that, is very, very appropriate. And the side effects were not super severe. That is, it didn't cause permanent health problems for the things there. Moderna did have to go with a fairly high dose, and so to get the antibodies. Some of the other vaccines are able to go with lower doses to get responses that are pretty high, including the J&J and the Pfizer. And so there's a lot of characteristics of these vaccines. It's great that we have multiple of them that are going out there. And yes, I think
you know the data better than I do. But the data showed that everybody with a high dose had a side effect.
Yeah, but some of that is not dramatic, where it's just super painful. But yes, we need to make sure there's not severe side effects. The FDA, I think, will do a good job of that, despite the pressure. But you don't have a choice. People act like you have a choice. People don't feel like going to the stadium when they might get infected.
But you don't have a choice. People act like you have a choice.
The economy is not going to be anything like it was. It's going to take a long time to recover. It's going to be, people are going to be surprised at how slow and how fitful this is.
It's just going to take a long time to recover. It's going to be, people are going to be surprised at how slow and how fitful this is.
No doubt you have realized the splendor of my conception. First, a necklace of death about the earth. 50 globes, each releasing its nerve gas over a designated area, each capable of 100 million people. The human race, as you know it, will cease to exist.
Who needs a James Bond villain, everyone, when media darling eugenicist Bill Gates is off to such a celebrated start? While earning billions of dollars off his investments in the experimental vac industry, Bill Gates claims to be some sort of altruist, and all of pop culture media support this spurious tale. But remember when Bill Gates became the world's richest man as a result of ruthless business practices and abuse of powers? And remember the world's most evil corporation, Monsanto, creators of DDT, Agent Orange, and genetically modified foods, the company working tirelessly to replace all the world's organic seed banks with their own patented GMO varieties so they can one day own the entire world's food supply? Well, now Monsanto, along with agribusiness giant Cargill, are primarily controlled by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is also the biggest farmland owner in the U.S. Bill Gates says we all must eat GMO food, while aggressively working towards giving us no choice in the matter. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation sponsored the mRNA, which are now opening the gates to genetically modified humans, recklessly experimenting on the human genome in hundreds of millions of people. And now, Bill is preparing to block out the sun. Bill Gates is working with Harvard's David Keith on a stratospheric solar geoengineering experiment known as SCOPEX, wherein a kilogram of calcium carbonate particles will be released in the stratosphere to see how viable it will be at reflecting the light from the sun away from the surface of the Earth. They claim they want to lower the temperature of the Earth, despite the fact that nobody has any idea what this could do to the overall system of the planet.
Since the beginning of time, man has yearned to destroy the sun. I will do the next best thing. Block it out.
In the film The Matrix, they tried to block out the sun in order to stop the man-made AI threat. But it ended up enslaving all of mankind in the Matrix. In the film Snowpiercer, the world tried blocking out the sun to stop global warming, but ended up triggering a cataclysmic ice age. And in the dystopian reality that we live in today, Bill Gates wants to save the world by blocking out the sun. We are told to trust him. We are told to trust the science, even though the so-called science is wildly theoretical, inconclusive, and universally challenged. Bill Gates does indeed embody the characteristics of an evil James Bond villain. But the real villains are obviously the degenerates of world governments and mainstream media who allow this damaged, deranged old man in a pink sweater to play out his father's dreams of depopulation and eugenics on the world stage, while at the same time protecting the big banks and multinational corporations who are orchestrating this entire war against humanity.